It's now 6 o'clock, and I call this regularly scheduled City Council meeting to order. For our invocation this evening, I would ask that we observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Councilman Reel will lead us in the pledge. Please rise. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4 is the consent agenda. Is there any part of the consent agenda that any council person would like to remove?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 5, presentation to the City Council by members of the public. I have no cards. Is there anyone here who would like to address the council according to the rules stated in the agenda? If not, we'll go on to item 6, discussion and possible action on the approval of an agreement between the City of Commerce and the Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
Mayor, Council, this is Howdy Lisenby, City Manager. We've been discussing this item for a little while now, and so to not belabor the point, the city has operated the youth recreation sports leagues on its own for a number of years. I don't think anybody would argue with me that the quality of these leagues has kind of deteriorated over time. And so we've been looking at ways to recreate or rehabilitate the city's youth sports leagues programs. And so we've had a number of conversations with representatives from the Boys and Girls Club. Most people recognize the name of the Boys and Girls Club as a national organization that's highly respected. And they already have a presence in Commerce, and they have a presence at each of our school campuses for after-school programs. And so we've been exploring options so that the city could partner with the Boys and Girls Club to better offer youth recreation sports to the children of our community so that they have some staff and some already created administrative capacity to do registrations, to do volunteer training, to recruit coaches. They have access to paid student workers from the university that could help the leagues. And so it would greatly increase the number of people that are involved in making these recreation leagues function and flow well, while still allowing parents to be involved in the leagues. And so from the student and the parents' point of view, not a whole lot changes. But from our point of view and the administration of the leagues and all of that work, it multiplies our ability to get that done well. We had talked about a memorandum of agreement and then decided that we really needed that to be transferred into a full contract, a full agreement. And so we worked with our attorneys and with their attorneys, and so you have a draft of that agreement. There were some cosmetic changes that were recommended by our attorneys, and so I have a copy of the final agreement. It was mainly cosmetic changes. So it's our request that the council authorize me to negotiate and execute a contract, an agreement with the Boys and Girls Club, by which we partner to run the administrative side of our youth recreation leagues. And with that, I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? I will not be voting on this item since I am on the board of the local Boys and Girls Club and the corporate board that will be handling this contract. Is there a motion related to this item?
I'll make a motion that we approve an agreement between the City of Commerce and Boys and Girls Club of America.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 7, discussion and possible action on the resolution allocating hotel occupancy tax grants.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So at this time, we are not making a recommendation on how you want to allocate these funds. I will
Why would
leave
that be?
Because I don't want to make that decision.
Oh, okay.
So I will remind everybody that you do have to meet both criteria. One of those criteria is putting heads in beds. And so I will leave it up to you to decide how you want to split these funds. Any questions before I go sit down?
You want to answer them, so, no. Okay, comments, questions, proposals?
Well, I will jump out first and get started.
All right.
I think the key there is meet heads and beds. And without a doubt, I think the majority of that is met with the athletic department at the university. I would recommend giving the university their full $12,000. The other two entities that have received previously are the Children's Museum and the Chamber of Commerce. That the Children's Museum requested $75,000. I mean $7,500. That we half that for $3,750. The same with the Chamber. They've asked for $6,000. That we half that to $3,000, and we go ahead and fund the $800 for the Garden Club. That would be $19,550, and we have 20 that we're going to do. I do realize that some of those might be a stretch, but I think that that's a starting point, so it's all y'all's.
Comments?
We have in the past, I mean, we have given the money to the organizations that, you know, the Chamber as well as the Northeast Texas. And I can see where we possibly could say that they do put heads in beds with a stretch. It has, and I think if we're going to give it to them, we need to make sure that we have that on the record that that is what we're doing.
I also think that we need to think long and hard as we go forward, that where the heads and beds, bringing that in. I think this is a step by giving them only a portion, but we really need to go with heads and beds.
Right.
Moving forward.
So I will say one more thing, that the Chamber is acting as our tourism location headquarters. So that is why they fall under this category strongly, is because they are a tourism center. We don't have a welcome center for
They meet one portion of it, as well as the other three as well. So,
Other thoughts?
I agree. I think we need to kind of put them on notice.
right.
They've been very generous, but we're going to apply stricter rules going forward.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
So moved.
What?
Just what she said.
It's what she said. Would you review that, please,
Yeah.
so we all understand?
Texas A&M Commerce Athletic Department,
It is $12,000.
$12,037.50 for Children's Museum, $3,000 for the Chamber, and $800 for the Lewis Drake Garden Club.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Administratively, we will request that these organizations find a way to document generation of heads and beds, so that we can try to provide some additional reporting and compliance documentation.
Item 8, discussion and possible action on a resolution adopting the Hazardous Mitigation Action Plan for Hunt County.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Back in 2018, the council authorized city staff to pursue the development of a hazard mitigation action plan in conjunction with Hunt County and the NCT COG, or the North Central Texas Council of Governments, who partners with FEMA and allows the city to work with other entities within Hunt County, as we all face similar hazards when it comes to hazard mitigation. See winter storm of February 2021. So we developed this plan. The city was operating under the 2015 to 2020 Hazard Mitigation Action Plan. In 2018, you authorized staff to move forward in developing this plan and working with Hunt County and NCT COG to develop this plan. The intent was to adopt the plan in 2020 for an effective date of 2021. However, due to COVID and several other things, they were unable to conduct the public hearings and whatnot. So they're asking us now to bring this finalized plan to you all for formal adoption and approval. Happy to take questions if you have them.
Is there a motion?
Move that we accept the resolution adopting the MAP plan for the commerce in Hunt County.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 9, discussion and possible action on a resolution awarding a contract for an employee benefits insurance broker for the City of Commerce employees and authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documentation.
Mayor and Council, as you all are probably aware of, we contract with an insurance broker, the city does, to administer benefits such as health insurance, dental insurance, vision, short-term, long-term disability, and life insurance for city employees. This is a service that was historically provided to the city by a group, Wellspring Insurance Agency, whom the city's worked with since about 2006. In May of 2019, we released an RFP, and the council awarded it to Wellspring. So we were due again after a 2-year contract in May of this year to release an RFP for services related to insurance brokerage for city employee benefits. We received bids toward the end of May, and we received proposals from 3 companies. I believe one was out of Tyler. The other was from JBA Financial right here across the street here in downtown Commerce. And then the third group we received a bid from was Hub International, who end of 2020, early 2021 bought out Wellspring Insurance. So despite the city having been with Wellspring since 2006, they were bought out by Hub, which is a very large group that administers benefits. They started in Canada and they work with groups all over the United States. With the city being smaller and with us having a group of employees that requires assistance when it comes to open enrollment, and that's something that's coordinated every year through my office, we felt that it was a good time to move to a more local firm. And Sarah Alderman, who's here and may want to address you all here in just a second, would be the insurance broker for our city employees, which means employees have access to her and her staff right across the street should they have questions related to benefits and not be able to come by my office. Sarah and I would be working together to assist employees when it comes to the administration of these benefits as well as open enrollment every year. Unbeknownst to us until we started negotiating costs related to this, by making the move to JBA Financial, the city will also realize a savings. So that was an added bonus to making this transition. So staff recommends award of this contract to JBA Financial.
Are there questions? Is there a motion?
I move that we award the contract to JBA Financial.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Item 10, first reading. Discussion and possible action on amending ordinance 2020-20 to correctly establish proper reinvestment zone naming criteria for the formerly adopted ordinance establishing reinvestment zone 2020-01.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you all may recall, back in December of 2020, you all approved the establishment of a reinvestment zone, which would include Zurn and Haru Pipes, and this allowed us to enter into a tax abatement agreement with them. Then again in December and January, so excuse me, your first reinvestment zone that you all established was in October of 2020. And the second reinvestment zone that you all established, which was related to the property at 400 Maple Street, the Covidian building, you all passed that ordinance in December of 2020 and January of 2021. Over the last few months, that process has moved from City Hall to the Hunt County Chief Appraiser, and he moved the establishment of that reinvestment zone onto the Comptroller's office. And I believe it was last week our EDC director received an email back letting us know that due simply to the fact that the naming we used to establish those reinvestment zones didn't meet the criteria for naming because it included ordinance or date numbers, and they don't allow that. It didn't move through the Comptroller's office like we intended it to do. So items number 10 and 11 address both of those reinvestment zones. Reinvestment zone formerly named 2020-01 and 2020-02 to reestablish them with proper naming criteria. I believe what we settled on was the Knight Street reinvestment zone for the property at 400 Maple Street and the Industrial Park reinvestment zone for the property that includes Zurn and Haru Pipe. So we're just asking that you approve the amendment to these ordinances so that we can name them appropriately and move these on through.
Can we do both of those at the same time?
I would believe we need two separate motions for the amendment of each ordinance.
And the first one was the Knight property?
Right, the Knight Street reinvestment zone.
Okay, I move that we rename to the Knight Street Reinvestment Zone.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 11, discussion and possible action on amending ordinance 2021-03 to correctly establish proper reinvestment zone naming criteria for the formerly adopted ordinance establishing reinvestment zone 2020-02. Is there a motion related to that?
So I don't know if we need to correct this, but I flopped the two. So the first one that you approved was the Industrial Park reinvestment zone, and this one is the Knight Street reinvestment
Do
zone.
we need to redo that?
We technically just did number 11, so we would be.
We'll just go back and do 10.
That's right.
Okay, folks, refer to 10 and make a motion.
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We did 10 and 11. Item 12. First reading, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance approving a conditional use permit to allow for a bed and breakfast in use in the neighborhood service district for the property located at 1113 Charles Drive in Commerce, Texas, 75428, property ID 49700, legal description S3795 Knight John Edition, Hunt County, Block 2, Lot 22, 24, 26 acres, .1377. Says public hearing.
Mayor, Howdy Lisenby, City Manager. Thank you for opportunity to present this item. We received an application for a conditional use permit that was taken through the Planning and Zoning Commission. As you're aware, they have the opportunity and obligation to hear these kind of cases and then make a recommendation for approval or denial of the request. At the time the application was presented to the Planning and Zoning Board, staff's recommendation was denial of the application, and the Planning and Zoning Board voted unanimously to deny the request from the applicant. However, they don't have final jurisdiction. All they are doing is making recommendations to which the City Council has the final say. So you have the opportunity to approve the conditional use permit or deny. At this point, the staff recommendation still is to deny the application, not because of the use as a bed and breakfast, but mainly because of the square footage of the structure. It's effectively a tiny home that doesn't meet the minimum square footage requirements of our zoning regulations, and so staff has recommended denial of the conditional use permit.
Must we have a public hearing before we act on it?
Yes. Yes, Mayor.
At what time? 6:20, open a public hearing related to agenda item 12. Is there a person here to speak to it?
Item 13, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Nope, we're on 12.
I'm on
We're on
12.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
My mistake. I apologize.
If not, I'll close this public hearing at 6:21. And is there a motion related to
Mayor.
this?
I will be recusing myself from this vote.
Okay.
I move that we deny the conditional use permit.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Now, item 13, first reading, discussion and possible action on an ordinance of the City of Commerce authorizing the extended sale of alcohol hours for current and future eligible establishments in the City of Commerce, conditioned on criteria within the late hours permit, establishing a fee, providing for an application, permit, and compliance procedure, providing for a penalty, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Mayor, Council, Howdy Lisenby, City Manager. I think we failed to mention at the very beginning of the meeting that our attorney Charles Anderson recently had plastic surgery, and it went astonishingly well.
He looks younger.
Actually, Charles just had elbow surgery, and so this is Tad, and he is joining us tonight. And so I don't think we actually introduced Tad. He is not Charles, but he is equally, or some would argue, higher qualified than Charles. You can feel free to share that with him later. The item before us today is an ordinance that would allow for establishments that sell alcohol to operate at later hours. Currently, we believe they're required to close at midnight. State law does allow for a local option to allow that to be extended to 2 a.m. And so the request is that we allow these establishments to open until 2 a.m. instead of midnight. And so the city has reviewed the state law. We've reviewed the necessary information. At this point, staff is not opposed. And so I guess that's as much of an endorsement as we typically would give. In a previous city in which I worked, we had a very similar request come forward. There was a lot of vocal opposition within our community against the extended hours, and most of the argument that was presented is that we would see a huge increase in crime, we would see a huge increase in drunk driving, and that people would die. It was approved, they were allowed to stay open later, and then we began to collect data for a number of years, and none of those fears ever came to fruition. We didn't see an increase in crime, we didn't see an increase in drunk driving, and we saw no fatalities that could be attributed to this move. So your city staff is not in the position to make policy. We implement the policy that you adopt, and so we are not opposed to this request, and we're willing to serve in any way that you ask us to.
Questions?
Got a couple of questions. Whenever I was reading through this, are we saying that we're opening from 12 to 2 every night? The ability to have it where they can be open every night?
It is our understanding of state law that it is a blanket approval, and there's not I don't believe state law has a day of the week restriction.
And can the city do that?
Typically, you can't do something that's separate from what state law establishes, but I'll defer to Tad.
I would have to look at the statute carefully, but typically my understanding, having read it once or twice, is that the statute provides that
opening hours are to 2 a.m. and that would be the mandatory. It would be every day.
Okay, the other question I have is, if we do move to approve this, is there a way where we could go in and have it where it's set for only, like, the ordinance set for 1 year, and we would review it after a year to renew it again, or a couple of years, or is it set and then we have to just go back in and say we want to deny it
Can they
in the
adopt it
future?
with a
Can we
sunset,
adopt it with a limit?
or can you change the ordinance at a future date?
I guess a
Hold on.
sunset, I guess I would say.
I don't see any reason that you could not adopt it with a sunset.
Typically, as home rule municipality, that is within the ability that we have. If you adopt or amend an ordinance today, that doesn't prevent future councils from adopting or amending ordinances. So I don't believe you're locking in future councils and future generations to never be able to readdress this again.
So
but-
could you set it that you do have to reapprove it every year, every 2 years, so that it,
I think it would not. You wouldn't want to do it in a way that it would be you would require a re-approval. If you were to do it, you could, I think, do it with a sunset provision that it expired on a certain day,
Right.
and it would expire unless the council reapproved it.
Okay.
Does that make does
Right,
the distinction make
that's
sense?
what I was asking for.
And tonight is just first reading,
Mhm.
so whatever we do tonight isn't the final, because you still have another second reading and public hearing as well.
okay, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the sunset. Is that just when another council,
You can create a ordinance that expires in 2 years, let's say. And so then it would require a council 2 years from now to revisit this issue and take a look at the data from law enforcement, see what the impact on the community has been, and then they would have the option to renew it without a sunset, or they could renew it for another 2 years. It just kind of gives you opportunity to test drive, if you will.
and do they have to apply for permits every year to know that an establishment is in good standing with the state?
I'll let Molly answer that one.
So the way we structured this ordinance is that every year they would have to reapply.
Okay.
And pay the permit fee to reapply, but that they're subject to inspections by TABC and city staff and code enforcement at any point.
I would just like to add, we can certainly, because this is first reading, we can certainly investigate the sunset availability and before second reading.
Okay, that's what I'd like to have it where it would be a sunset in 2 years, or if we can even put a sunset in.
So do we go ahead and approve it on the first reading?
With the,
With these changes, and
Mhm.
so that we can incorporate that into the document before it gets to second reading.
Okay.
And
Was that a motion?
yes,
Yes.
that was a motion. And I'm seconding it.
Could you restate it?
Okay, the motion, the motion is that we accept it as it's written with a sunset clause if it's available for us for in a 2-year period.
Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Okay. And there is a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
One opposed? And that motion carries. Okay. Item 14, second reading. Discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending Chapter 38, Article 4, titled Noise. And
Good-
look who shows up.
Who shows up? Good evening. This is the second reading of amending the noise ordinance, and basically what this amendment did was put a little more teeth in us. It established a fine. It also established the standardized noise ordinances, noise levels that we talked about last time with the decibels. It changed the time of day for daytime to be between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., creating a 56 decibel from property line to property line. In nighttime, it shut the noise level off at 10 p.m., lowering it to 49 decibels. Other than that, that's about all the changes there are. If you have any other questions on the second reading, I'll be happy to answer them.
Is there a motion?
Move that we approve second reading.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 15, second reading. Discussion and possible action on an ordinance implementing a resident-only parking, permitted parking model for citizens of Commerce living on or nearby the Texas A&M University Commerce campus.
This ordinance, the second reading, establishes a residential parking area. So basically those streets around the campus outlined in section 1.02 in this ordinance, what they would do is they would apply for a parking permit similar to what the university does. And it's a window sticker that these streets are narrow. As an example, Ash Street right down from City Hall here is pretty narrow. So that's one of the streets on this list. They would come up and apply with dispatch for this permit. They would get a window sticker plus a visitor pass, stick it on their window, and then they have permission to park on that street. In the case of Ash Street, it would only be on the south side of the street on the left-hand side. That creates an avenue on these narrow streets for us to get service trucks, emergency services, and other large vehicles down these streets and push the clutter out of the way, and also push the students that are not getting permits and cluttering those streets back onto campus.
Chris, how will you notify the residents?
We're going to use Jamie's new system to create a letter, and it's kind of like a mail serve. Everybody in those will take that street and type it into her system, and it'll generate. We'll generate the letter, and then we'll mail it out. After everybody has the letter and has time to review it, we're going to probably wait 30 days because it is going to be a sensitive issue before we start enforcing it. We're going to try to get the signs put up pretty quick, but we're not going to start enforcing it until everybody has got that letter, because those signs are going to prompt a lot of questions and phone calls. I think some people will not receive the letter, or they have moved. When they start seeing those signs, they're going to probably contact us. So that will give us a buffer zone in there before we just really start hammering them.
And what will the sign say?
The sign, no parking, this side of the
Just no
street.
parking.
Yeah.
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 Will it not
Well, so we've actually had some debate about that. We have a lot of, we're having trouble finding those signs that say no parking without city permit. I talked to Joe again. If we can get those, that's what I want them to say. If not, it's going to be no parking signs for right now. And when I can switch them out, we're going to switch them out. We've got a lot of no parking signs in the house. The poles go up. We may put up the no parking signs and start generating the phone calls and getting it lined out. Switch them out as we can.
Will that be in the letter? We can put that in the letter.
We can put it in the letter. Mm-hmm.
Is there a motion?
Move that we accept the second reading.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Item 16, City Manager's Report.
Mayor, Council, this is City Manager Howdy Lisenby. Lest anyone think I have become incredibly lazy and just sit up here and don't do anything, it is one of the virtues of having a really great team that they can do all the work and I can just sit here and look absolutely stunning. So I appreciate that opportunity. So in light of that, for our finance update, we will allow the illustrious Jamie Campbell to give the finance update.
Thank you, Howdy. Mayor and Council, so we're going to start with your property tax revenue. As of May 2021, we have reached a little over 95% of our tax levy. And if you remember, our budgeted revenue is at 97% of our tax levy. So we are very close to meeting our budgeted numbers, and hopefully we will continue with the trend that we have in the past few years and surpass it. Any questions on property tax? No? Okay. On sales tax, I will say that we did have a jump in June. I have not gotten the confidential report yet from the controller's office. And so as soon as I get that in, hopefully by time for the next council meeting, I'll have an update for you. If I was to make an assumption, it's going to be related to the stimulus payments that were still being received in April. More than likely, we'll be seeing an increase in our retail. Because if you remember, this is 2 months behind. So this would be related to April sales activity. So if I was to make a guess, that's where it would be. We are very close to meeting our budgeted numbers with 3 months left in the year. So I really hope that we can meet our revenue numbers that we had last year of 1.15 million. So fingers crossed. Any questions on sales tax? All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Molly, calendar update?
Okay, a few upcoming events. Last month, we let you all know that we had plans to partner with the Chamber of Commerce. The city is assisting in providing the fireworks show this year, which the Chamber is very excited about and we're very excited about. So that will take place, I believe, at Centennial Park on Saturday, July 3rd. Staff is even more excited to see the Battle of the Badges, where our fire and police department will face off in a softball tournament. We have plenty of jokes if you're interested in hearing them. And I believe that will take place at 5 p.m. And then the fireworks show will take place at dark. So we hope that everyone can join us for that.
I believe there's a concert at 6. The Chamber does have a band coming in for a concert.
And then, of course, we'll remind you every month from May through September that the city is doing their weekly by sections in the city mosquito spraying. This calendar is available on the city's website at commercetx.org. There's a little button that says mosquito spraying schedule. And then the map is there as well for you to see what region you're in and when we will be spraying. As a reminder, we will not be spraying on July 4th, but we will pick up with that region the following week. And we still have Farmers Market going every Saturday over on Bonham Alley. That begins at 8 a.m. And I believe they stick around till about 11 or noon. So that's going on through September as well. Those are all that I have.
Thank you. I don't have any formal personnel updates, but I'm going to kind of merge that with some project updates. Wow, that's kind of... Many of you are aware, and it's been released into the media now, that starting on June the 3rd, was kind of in the midst of a lot of rain and localized flooding that we were encountering around the community. We had a sewer trunk line, which is not, you've got service lines that come from your house to a main. You've got mains that service collection for wastewater from homes and businesses. And then all of those mains will usually meet up at a lift station or a trunk line that takes that larger volume of flow and brings it to the wastewater plant. And so on June 3rd, we were made aware of a potential leak on one of our sewer trunk lines at a creek that is across the street from the wastewater plant out on FM 3218. So staff and I went and investigated and did in fact find that there was a sewer leak that had happened as a result of some of the flooding, and it was adjacent to a creek, and so we had wastewater that was being discharged directly into the creek during that flood and rain event. So we quickly got some heavy equipment out on site and began to dig up the line that was there. It's an 18-inch sewer trunk line. It was approximately 7.5 feet below grade, and it was right adjacent to a creek that was somewhat in flood condition. And so where I tie personnel into this is being there on site with those guys the first night until midnight, watching them dig up this line in what I don't think anyone would describe as pristine conditions, and then watching the professionalism and the ingenuity that they demonstrated to try to dam off the leak away from the creek to minimize the discharge, but then they had to try to get the water out of the hole, off of the leak, so that they could get down in the hole and assess what was going on. And so at midnight on a Friday night, having staff getting down in a hole full of untreated sewer wastewater mixed with rainwater to assess damage to a pipe was, I'm not going to say it was fun, because that's not a pleasant environment for anybody to be in, but it's also inspirational to see that they didn't even question. They didn't even think twice. They dig the hole, they get in the hole, they figure out what's wrong. But because of the flood conditions, we couldn't actually complete the repairs until the following Wednesday at noon. And so this discharge continued to happen for approximately 5.5 days. Best estimates that we have based on observation and some pumping that we did, it was approximately 8.6 million gallons of wastewater was discharged. Now, it's also important to note that we don't average that much flow under normal conditions. A peak water consumption day for our community is 1.2 million gallons of potable drinking water is what our city averages on a peak day. So if all 5.5 days were peak water demand and every gallon of drinking water was consumed was then flushed down a sewer line, you would expect 5.5 to 6 million gallons coming through these lines. Well, we're estimating 8.6 million gallons was released because our sewer collection system doesn't just collect wastewater from homes and businesses, but somehow or another also collects rainwater. That is not proper design for a wastewater system, but we collect a tremendous volume of rainwater through our collection system. So the water that was discharged was a combination of untreated wastewater and rainwater that was flowing down these mains. During the course of this period that the discharge happened, the South Sulphur River was in significant flood stage. And in case anybody really wants to know and has trouble sleeping at night, the U.S. Geological Society, or the USGS, has a number of websites in which they have monitoring stations on the rivers that gauge the rate of flow. And so you can see and report and track graphs of how much water is flowing down a given river segment at any time. And based on the data from the USGS, we estimate 14 billion gallons of water flowed by at the same time this 8.6 million gallons was released. And so we don't say that to make ourselves feel better about the event, because any wastewater discharge is an environmental issue that we're going to own and we're going to clean up. But it also does provide some context that because of the flood conditions, these flows were greatly diluted. The last thing I'll say is that our staff was able to take some water samples upstream of the discharge, at the point of discharge, and then downstream before it hit the river. There's a whole number of lab tests that are done to test quality of water, but where wastewater is involved, one of the tests that the state recommends is called dissolved oxygen, or DO. I don't want to get too technical, but for the environment, fish, plants, wildlife, they need oxygen in the water to sustain life. And so you evaluate the dissolved oxygen levels in the water to make sure that those levels aren't compromised by the discharge. At all times during the course of this discharge, our dissolved oxygen levels passed tests, and we were able to give that information to the state of Texas. So the state has been notified, local media and local governments have been notified, impacted landowners are notified, but we are also at the mercy of the state. And so I would expect some kind of enforcement action from the state of Texas, and we will comply with whatever enforcement action that comes our way, and we'll keep you up to date. But in connection with this discharge, I will report we have a project that you're aware of at the wastewater treatment plant that has been ongoing for a while now, specifically to try to prevent things like this from happening. I'm not in the business of making excuses, but I do want you to be aware of what's going on, that the 3 pumps that are at the plant that you're aware of, only one of those pumps is operational. 2 of those 3 pumps are not operational and have not been for a number of years. And so we have completed the environmental design to replace those 3 pumps, and submitted all of that to the state of Texas for them to review. And once we get their approval, we buy the pumps and install them. We have been waiting on the state's approval for that process for at least 3 months. And so we got the first feedback from them last week. Our engineers have already replied and given them answers to their questions. So we're hopeful that we can order the pumps in the coming weeks and get that project under construction to improve how we handle this massive inflow of rainwater when it rains. And so that's the update on that project. The state finally did talk to us, ask some questions. We've answered their questions, but we're still waiting their final approval to complete that construction project at the plant. Finally, I'll remind the council, we have called a special city council meeting for this Thursday evening to discuss Project Gray Wolf. That is I would classify it as an exciting economic development opportunity for our community to bring a major manufacturer here. And so that gives us the opportunity to discuss some economic incentives to try to get that client landed and on the ground here in our community. And so that meeting will be Thursday evening here at City Hall. That concludes our report, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
May I add one comment? I had a citizen request as to what it is the city sprays to kill mosquitoes, and I very quickly got a chemical analysis that I certainly didn't understand, but it did satisfy the citizen's request. So if anyone asks, it's readily available. And I learned that weekly we test mosquitoes to see what's available to us. So that's good news. Anything else?
We do recommend an executive session. Should be brief.
Okay, there is a need for an executive session. We will meet under 2 parts of the law, 551.0711 and 551.0712, and discuss lien forgiveness, 806 Park Street. Is there a motion for an executive session? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think no one opposes, so we will go into executive session.
Time is 6:47 p.m.
Is there a motion related to our executive session?
I don't have it in front of me. I move that we release the interest on the lien for, what's the property? 806 Park.
And both lanes, correct?
Both liens.
Both lanes, yeah. Interest on both lanes.
Interest
Correct.
on both liens.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries, and knowing no other business, this meeting is adjourned. At 7:16.
It's hard to teach about new tricks.
It won't work, will it? It ain't a new trick, though. I have only been doing it 5 years.